Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take that stack of source material you sent over all those notes and observations, and really just pull out the most important insights for you.
And today, we're diving into something that seems deceptively simple.
Right. The daily routine.
Exactly, the daily routine. We've got two great case studies from the sources today, Emma and John. And our mission really is not just to list what they do.
No, not at all.
It's to pull out the high-value vocabulary, the very sophisticated way they talk about their own actions.
Exactly. It's about dissecting their schedules, sure, but also analyzing the psychological triggers that are so deeply ingrained in what they do. And the reason we're doing this is to give you, the listener, a kind of roadmap, a way to understand and maybe even optimize your own life with a bit more precision.
It's all about language, because routines are never just a simple list. They're these complex negotiations, you know.
A negotiation between what?
Between how much energy you have, what your job demands, and your own personal goals. We're looking for the patterns, the ways they fight off that feeling of being sluggish, how they optimize focus.
And the tension. The tension between wanting to do things and just needing to rest.
That's it.
And the source material just hands us that core conflict right away. I love this. It starts right out of the gate with John's confession.
That he's feeling sluggish.
He feels sluggish this morning. And he even gives us the vocabulary for why. He says he spent the weekend burning the candle at both ends.
And that phrase, burning the candle at both ends, it's such a fantastic high-value piece of language.
Yes.
It just paints this perfect picture of exhaustion. You know exactly what he means. Sustained overwork, late nights. He's pushed himself way past his limit.
And the details really fill in that picture. He was up at the, quote, crack of dawn on Saturday for what he calls a grueling weekend trek with his dog.
So let's define grueling right there. We're talking about something that is extremely difficult, tiring, demanding. This was not a chill walk in the park.
No.
This was a high-intensity physical activity that just drained his batteries.
And he didn't stop there. He followed it up on Sunday with an industrious, deep clean of his entire apartment.
Industrious. I mean, that word means dedicated, diligent, hardworking. The combination is so telling.
It really is.
John seems to have this really strong internal drive, this need to be active, disciplined, sometimes, you know, to his own detriment. He basically scheduled a second work week for his weekend.
Which sets up the perfect contrast with Emma.
The perfect foil, yeah.
She describes her weekend as, quote, far more sedentary.
And sedentary is the exact right word. It means, you know, lots of sitting, very little physical activity. She went to the movies, caught up with a friend over coffee.
And here's the critical part. She frames her sedentary weekend as infinitely more restorative.
So there it is.
There's the tension. Before the workday even starts, we have it laid out for you. It's John's theory that active, industrious discipline is the way, even for rest.
The grueling track.
Versus Emma's theory that no, passive sedentary decompression is the real path to recovery. So we have to track this. We have to see how this difference plays out across their entire Monday.
That's our framework. Is the goal of the routine invigoration, you know, a sharp jolt to get you going? Or is it restoration, a gentle easing back into things?
Let's find out. Let's see how they start the day. Okay, so let's start with the commencing moment, the alarm. It jolts John awake at 7 a.m. sharp.
And that phrase, jolts me awake, that's immediate evidence, right? His energy is low, the awakening is forced, it's disruptive, it's not natural.
Right. It's a 7 a.m. start, pretty standard, but his resistance to it is just so relatable. He says he rarely springs out of bed immediately.
That little hesitation, that reluctance to spring, that's the first point of friction in his whole routine. It tells you that even though he wants to be industrious, he struggles with that activation energy.
And that delay, that often leads to a compromised start. And this is where we see a really significant modern habit take root. One he himself calls a terrible habit. He immediately reaches for his phone for his morning doom scrolling.
Okay, let's spend some real time on doom scrolling, because we need to understand why it's such a terrible habit, especially for someone who's already feeling sluggish.
Well, it's terrible because of what it does to your brain, right? The neurochemical response. The sources analyze it as a digital transition before facing reality.
A digital transition.
Yeah, you're choosing to load your brain with high-stakes information that you have absolutely no control over.
Exactly. So when John is reading headlines about, you know, global crises or political turmoil, the doom, his body doesn't know the difference between a scary headline and an actual physical threat.
So his cortisol levels spike.
Right out of the gate. Cortisol, the stress hormone. He is physically preparing his body for a crisis that is not actually happening in his bedroom.
He's just making his morning stress worse, turning his brain from this, low power, ready to go state into a high alert fight or flight state. And he's burning through energy that he desperately needs for his actual workday, all before he's even brushed his teeth.
And it connects directly to this idea of attention residue, even if he only scrolls for, say, 5 minutes. The cognitive impact, the residue from those stressful thoughts, it lingers.
It pollutes his mental clarity.
Totally. It's the ultimate example of modern self-sabotage, all in the name of staying informed.
Which makes his very next action, this habit of order, feel like this desperate compensatory move.
Okay, what is it?
He immediately takes back control by making the bed. He calls it the first order of business, to bring a sense of order to the chaos.
Oh, that is a crucial psychological observation.
Yeah.
Because the chaos he's trying to control isn't just the messy sheets.
Right.
It's the mental chaos he just created with the doom scrolling.
So making the bed is like a micro win.
It's a micro win. It signals to his subconscious that, okay, the world out there might be a mess, but my immediate environment is under my control.
It's a way to regulate his mood and set a precedent for the day. He completes one small, tangible task, and that gives him the momentum he needs to push past that sluggish feeling.
It's a fascinating strategy. He's fighting digital chaos with physical discipline.
Okay, so moving from order to invigoration, we find John's signature move in his hygiene rituals.
The sensory shock.
The sensory shock. He goes straight to the bathroom and splashes his face with freezing cold water.
He calls this shock to the system incredibly invigorating, and this links right back to that theme we established. For John, the solution to feeling sluggish is a sharp, sudden, physical jolt.
And there's a physiological reason for this, right? It's not just in his head.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about vagal nerve stimulation. That shock of cold water triggers the vagus nerve, and that triggers a whole physiological response. It lowers the heart rate, but it increases blood flow to the brain, and it forces a state of heightened alertness.
It's a high-intensity solution for a body that defaults to inertia.
But then you look at Emma, she's the complete opposite.
The architectural opposite. I like that.
When asked about cold showers, she just dismisses the idea. She prefers piping hot showers to loosen up the muscles.
This contrast is where the deep dive really pays off. John needs that sharp neurological shock to fight the day. Emma, who's maybe carrying more tension, needs restoration. She needs the heat to calm her down, to ease her into readiness instead of jolting her into it.
It shows the choice of temperature is not random at all. It defines the mental state you're aiming for. So if you're struggling with being sluggish, like John, maybe you need invigoration.
And if you're struggling with tension or anxiety, like Emma, maybe you need restoration.
Exactly. They're both aiming for the same thing, optimal focus, but using totally different sensory inputs based on their own energy profiles.
So once they're either shocked or soothed, they turn to the aesthetics of attire. And even though they don't have a strict dress code, this is still a key ritual.
Emma talks about the dilemma of what to wear. She opts for smart casual, a blouse, tailored jeans, something she says is professional yet comfortable.
And this choice taps into a behavioral concept, right? Something called
enclosed cognition.
Enclosed cognition. Explain that for us.
It's the idea that clothes have a systematic influence on your psychological processes. So when Emma puts on clothes that signal professional, even if they're comfortable jeans, she's psychologically priming herself for the mental work of lecturing.
The clothes aren't just clothes, they're shifting her into work mode.
Precisely. If she wore, say, sweatpants to plan her lessons, she might struggle to summon that same level of focus and intensity.
It's a physical transition that reinforces a mental boundary.
And Jane does something similar. Jeans and a button-down shirt for presentability. The fact that there's no strict dress code means they have to make a conscious choice to uphold some standard.
And that conscious choice is a necessary part of preparing for high performance. All right, once the physical and mental uniform is on, the next critical piece is fuel. And section 2 starts with this really striking difference in their breakfast philosophies.
Emma sees breakfast as indispensable. She says she can't function without it.
Which tells us she knows she's at risk of an early cognitive crash if she doesn't eat something immediately.
Right. But her method is purely pragmatic. It's about speed, toast, and a robust cup of coffee. She needs that caffeine fix.
And the word robust is important. It's not a weak, milky latte.
No, this is strong, full-bodied coffee engineered for maximum impact. It shows she's relying on this external, high-intensity chemical stimulant to get going.
It's immediate energy, but it might not be stable energy.
Exactly. And then you have John, our invigoration advocate, who is on the complete other end of the spectrum. He says he absolutely loathes coffee. It makes him jittery. And this is just great self-awareness applied to his own performance. He knows his system, which is already a bit high-strung, just overreacts to that intense stimulation.
And maybe it feeds into the stress he already created with the doom scrolling.
Could be. So he's a devout green tea drinker. And that word, devout, it's perfect. It emphasizes this intentional, committed choice for a healthier, slower release alternative.
And his food choices match that. Greek yogurt, or when he's feeling ambitious, scrambled eggs.
I love that he calls scrambled eggs ambitious. It just signals that they take more effort, more time than Emma's toast. John is allocating that morning time to get stable, nutritional energy, protein, complex fats.
To avoid the spike and crash.
So
you see this clear trade-off. And for you, the listener, this is huge. Emma chooses speed and immediate function, and she accepts the volatility of caffeine.
While John chooses nutritional stability and sustained energy, and he accepts that he has to spend a few extra minutes preparing it.
Both are optimizing, but for completely different outcomes. Okay, so they're fueled up. Now they have to get to work. And this reveals a really powerful difference in their need for downtime.
The commute contrast.
So John takes the bus, and he notes the stop is a stone's throw from his flat.
A stone's throw, great idiom. It just means a very short distance. And that convenience, it just lowers the friction of starting his journey.
But the real value here isn't the short walk to the bus stop.
No.
It's the 20-minute bus ride itself, which he frames as welcome downtime.
This is a mandated rest period. He can't do anything else. He uses it to listen to a podcast or to zone out with music.
Right.
The bus forces him into this state of passive rest.
So he's physically moving, but mentally disengaged.
Exactly. It's a mental buffer. It's a chance to wash away some of that attention residue from the morning's doom scrolling before he even gets to the bookshop.
But Emma's situation is totally different. Her office is a 10-minute walk.
So she gains physical activity, she gains efficiency, she avoids any gridlock traffic. But does she lose that crucial mental buffer?
I think she does. Her commute is an active transition. She goes straight from getting ready right into physical activity, and she's at the office ready to go in 10 minutes. She completely misses out on that structured downtime the bus gives John.
And the source material points out something else fascinating about her routine. It's fragile.
How so?
She enjoys the walk now, but she's worried about regret when winter sets in.
Okay.
That worry is so important. It shows that her routine is highly dependent on good weather. When it gets cold and miserable, that walk could become a source of dread.
And it could break her entire habit loop.
It could. John's bus ride, while maybe a bit slower, is consistent. It's shelter, it's mental space, no matter what the weather's doing. His routine is more robust.
So the trade-off is stark. Emma gets efficiency and exercise, but sacrifices the mental buffer. John gives up a little time, but he gets a structured, passive, mental rest period. And a deep dive into how your commute type really dictates your mental readiness when you arrive at work.
So we hit 9:00 a.m. and the intensity levels of their jobs are just immediately obvious.
Let's look at Emma's mentally taxing start. She has to hit the ground running.
She settles in, boots up her computer, and is instantly hit with a deluge of emails.
A deluge.
Yeah.
That word, meaning a severe flood, it just perfectly captures that initial cognitive drain, that administrative bottleneck she has to clear first.
And the sources emphasize that right after that, she has to switch instantly to lesson planning and delivering lectures.
So that's immediate, high-intensity mental work. It's creative. It requires rapid context switching from admin mode to teaching mode.
It's inherently taxing, and it demands maximum concentration right away. It's all dictated by external deadlines. The students are coming. The lecture starts at a certain time.
Which makes her earlier reliance on that robust coffee totally understandable. She needs that jolt just to meet the demand.
Now, compare that to John's morning in the bookshop. It's significantly more tranquil.
His focus is on internal structure. He's doing administrative tasks, curating shelves, and handling the occasional early bird customer.
Curating shelves, I mean, that's a focused, deliberate activity. It's almost restorative in its own way. It requires patience and presence, not the rapid-fire thinking of a lecture.
So that's the key difference. Emma's day is defined by external demands that need an immediate response.
Right. Students, emails.
And John's day is defined by internal structure admin, curation, which allows for a steady, focused pace. His tranquil start lets him use that stable green tea energy efficiently.
While Emma needs that volatile coffee spike just to survive the initial flood.
But despite those different intensities, they both seem to rely on strong social structures. We see this with the camaraderie and social interplay in John's bookshop.
John describes his colleagues as wonderful and says they have a high degree of camaraderie.
And camaraderie, we define that as mutual trust and friendship among people who spend a lot of time together.
It's a vital part of workplace well-being. It transforms the environment from just a place you work to a supportive community.
And that support system is physically embodied at lunch. They actually coordinate their breaks to eat together.
And a shared meal is so much more than just refueling. It's a critical social ritual. It forces you to detach from work, to have external conversations, to break that internal monologue about your to-do list.
And that leads us right into the lunch strategy, which brings in this sharp focus on financial discipline, a really relevant topic for anyone trying to manage a budget.
Emma's strategy is all about that. She brings leftovers to save a bit of money. She's prioritizing her long-term financial health over the convenience of buying lunch.
And the source material gives us that perfect phrase for why this is so important. Eating out every day can really burn a hole in your pocket.
Such a powerful idiom. It emphasizes how quickly that money disappears. So Emma's discipline here is a very calculated decision about managing her resources.
But here's where the human element comes back in, because while Emma's discipline is almost perfect.
We have to acknowledge compromise. We have to acknowledge reality, especially with John.
Right. John, despite his super meticulous morning, his ambitious breakfast, he admits to succumbing to the temptation of the local bakery once a week.
And this is a planned indulgence. It's a key part of his system. It balances the narrative by showing that absolute 100% adherence is just. It's unrealistic for most people.
Like a strategic failure.
That's a great way to put it. He allows this one small break in the rule, the bakery treat, to prevent a total collapse of his discipline elsewhere.
It's a moment of short-term pleasure, built right into his highly structured life. It helps him avoid the psychological fatigue of constantly saying no to himself.
So what we see is that John's routine is structured with these necessary pressure release valves. And for you, the listener, that's a huge insight. A sustainable routine often requires these scheduled minor indulgences to keep the whole thing going.
Okay, as the workday winds down, that transition from high gear to rest mode is probably the most critical part of preventing burnout.
And what we see from the sources is that this transition relies heavily on psychological signals, not just, leaving the office.
The essential element is what Emma does the second she walks through her front door. We call it the psychological shedding of work.
She sheds her smart casual work clothes for loungewear immediately.
And this is a textbook example of using a physical act as a powerful psychological trigger.
Yeah.
She says it herself. It tells her brain work is over.
The comfort of the loungewear is a literal physical boundary between her professional self and her personal self.
And John validates this completely. He reinforces the same idea, saying, there is nothing quite like the feeling of sweatpants after a day in jeans.
It's universal, right? That immediate substitution of restrictive clothes for comforting clothes signals safety. It signals a lower cognitive demand. You can relax now.
So next up is dinner prep. And for Emma, this is a fascinating dual process we call cooking, chaos, and therapy. She finds cooking making pasta or a stir fry to be therapeutic.
And therapeutic means providing a beneficial treatment for the body or mind. For Emma, whose whole day is spent on abstract intellectual work.
Lecturing, planning.
Exactly. The active, creative, hands-on process of cooking is a perfect way to transition. It engages a totally different part of her brain. She moves from high-level thinking to immediate tactile creation.
And it produces a tangible reward.
Yeah.
Dinner, which must be so satisfying after a day of dealing with intangible ideas.
But that therapeutic creation is immediately followed by what she calls the unavoidable evil.
The despised washing up. The dishes.
The dishes. She calls it a necessary evil because she believes a cluttered kitchen creates a cluttered mind.
Necessary evil is a brilliant term for it. It's something unpleasant you have to do to get a positive result. In her case, mental clarity through visual order.
This is a huge insight into how she processes stress. Emma knows that even though cleaning is tiring and she doesn't want to do it, the mental drain of looking at visual clutter is actually worse for her.
So she needs external control to maintain internal calm. The cooking is creative therapy. The mandatory washing up is forced cleaning therapy.
And she needs both to truly decompress. And getting rid of that clutter reduces the activation energy for the next morning. It's one less thing to deal with.
Okay, so let's look at their chosen forms of stress relief and entertainment. Emma has what we called a dual track.
A dual track, yeah. She either goes for pure escapism, binge watching a comedy series, or she tackles something more intellectual, like reading a chapter of a book.
And this shows incredible flexibility in managing her cognitive load. If her workday was just completely draining,
The deluge of emails, the tough lecture.
she defaults to mental vacancy, the comedy. But if she still has some brain power left and just needs to switch focus, she engages in a different kind of mental stimulation with the book.
She doesn't have a one-size-fits-all strategy for relaxing. It depends on the day.
Now, John, our disciplined gamer, he opts for an immersive escape. He finds playing online video games with friends is a great way to blow off steam.
And blow off steam, another great idiom for relieving stress through a focused activity. The key word in the sources, though, is immersive.
Right.
Video games demand so much focused attention, such rapid decision-making, that they force you to forget about everything else. It's an active mental clearing process.
It's a fascinating contrast. Emma's intellectual pursuit is focused reading, which is more absorptive. John's is focused, competitive problem solving. It's more aggressive. Both are engaging their minds, but in fundamentally different ways.
One is restorative through learning. The other is restorative through intense focus and competition.
Finally, we have to look at the discipline of exercise. John, the guy who needed a shock to the system in the morning, still needs structure for physical activity at night.
He admits he forces himself to go to the gym on specific days, Tuesdays and Thursdays.
And that phrase, forces himself, it's so revealing and I think highly relatable for a lot of us.
Oh, yeah.
It tells you that for him, exercise is not a source of immediate pleasure or energy. It is a task. It's managed by pure discipline.
And this really challenges that popular idea that exercise has to be fun to be sustainable. For John, discipline has to come in when motivation is low.
So by scheduling it on specific days, he removes the daily decision fatigue. He doesn't have to ask himself, should I go today? The decision is already made.
The effort then just becomes about overcoming the inertia of the first 5 minutes, getting out the door. After that, the physiological benefits usually take over. It's a lesson in discipline over motivation.
And as our deep dive reaches its final cycle for the day, we're looking at the last stage of the routine, sleep hygiene.
Or, as the sources put it, the attempt at rectification.
Yes, the attempt.
Yeah.
So John is fighting the perpetual blue light battle. He tries to avoid screens and phones before bed.
Because he knows about blue light and how it messes with melatonin production.
But he often fails.
And that failure is just such an honest admission. It acknowledges how incredibly hard it is to break these ingrained digital habits.
It's a moment of real vulnerability in the source material. Even the super disciplined John can't resist the pull of his phone right before bed.
But he has a conscious remedy, a classic piece of sleep hygiene. He reads a physical book to make himself drowsy.
And he aims for lights out by 11:00 p.m.
The physical book is key there. It's a low stimulation, fixed focus activity. It naturally lets the mind slow down and transition out of that high alert state from his evening gaming or, his last minute doom scrolling.
Now, Emma, she's a self-proclaimed night owl, and she faces a totally different problem. She's rarely asleep before midnight, but she is actively trying to rectify that.
Rectify. That means to put something right, to correct an error. And that word choice highlights the conscious, difficult effort it takes to adjust your own biology.
She's a night owl whose natural energy peaks late, but her job, with its 9 a.m. lectures, demands an early start.
She's literally fighting her own biology to align with her work commitments. And that attempt to rectify her schedule is a long, painful process. It involves things like strict light exposure, meal timing, behavioral controls.
All designed to try and shift her biological clock backward.
And what both of their wind-down routines really emphasize is that getting good sleep is an active process. It's often compromised. It involves a deliberate attempt to counteract all the stimulating habits of the modern world.
Now let's synthesize all this high-value vocabulary we've pulled out today, because this isn't just a list of words. This is the analytical toolkit we want you to walk away with.
Right. These are the words that allowed us to precisely articulate the intent and the psychological impact of every single action John and Emma took. Let's connect them back to the context.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Sluggish.
We started there. It means slow, lacking energy, inactive. John felt sluggish specifically because he had overspent his energy reserves by burning the candle at both ends. It's so much more specific than just saying, I'm tired.
It implies a heavy, pervasive drag.
Exactly. Next, doom scrolling.
The negative digital habit. Spending way too much time scrolling through bad news.
And crucially, we analyze this not as just passive viewing, but as an active stressor. It raises your cortisol, it creates that mental clutter, the chaos John immediately tries to fight by making his bed.
Okay, next up, a great idiom. A stone's throw.
A practical idiom for proximity. It just means a very short distance. And its use in describing John's commute highlights how convenience can transform public transit into a really low-friction part of your day.
Right, and then camaraderie.
We talked about this with John's bookshop team. It's that mutual trust and friendship that turns a job into a supportive community. It's the social glue.
Yeah, it's often reinforced by those shared meals. Okay, next, to decompress.
The overall goal of the evening. It just means to calm down and relax after work or tension. For Emma, that was therapeutic cooking. For John, immersive gaming. It's the intentional release of cognitive load.
And what about the words that got them into this mess in the first place? Like grueling.
Used to describe John's trek, extremely tiring and demanding. It signals that high-intensity output that directly led to him feeling sluggish later.
And he followed that up with an industrious deep clean.
Diligent, hardworking. It defines that internal drive he has to maintain order, even when his body was screaming for rest.
And the opposite of that was Emma's weekend, which she called
sedentary. Characterized by lots of sitting, little physical activity. It was her counter-strategy to John's activity. She chose passive restoration.
Which prepared her for the deluge of emails she faced Monday morning.
Yes, the deluge, the flood, the overwhelming rush. It perfectly conveys that immediate high cognitive load that made her robust coffee fix so necessary.
And to avoid the financial pain of buying lunch every day, which can
burn a hole in your pocket. That great idiom emphasizing the rapid cost of convenience, which is what drives Emma's discipline with meal prepping.
But sometimes you have to do something you don't want to.
A necessary evil, Emma's term for washing up. An unpleasant thing that has to be done to get a positive result, which for her was mental clarity.
And for John's gaming, the goal was to blow off steam.
To relieve tension, right. Through a focused, immersive activity that provides a controlled release.
And finally, Emma's goal with her sleep schedule, to rectify it.
To correct or put right an undesirable situation. It defines that conscious, difficult struggle to adjust her biology to meet her professional schedule.
You know, what stands out when you review these terms is that they're not just fancy words.
No, they're analytical tools.
By using them, Emma and John are defining the psychological intent and the physiological effect of every choice they make with such precision.
And the power for you listening is in applying that same specificity to your own life. Getting past just, I was tired, to, I was feeling sluggish because I had a grueling week.
Or moving beyond, I relaxed, to, I needed to decompress with an immersive activity. That precision is what enables better self-diagnosis and ultimately optimization. So we have completed our journey from the 7:01 a.m. jolt all the way to that midnight attempt at rectification. We've chronicled 2 very structured days, and we've highlighted that constant tension between John's need for invigoration and Emma's pursuit of restoration.
And we saw that a routine is really just a collection of these small, intentional rituals. They provide relief or energy or structure, whether it's the micro win of making the bed or the macro effort of trying to fix your entire sleep cycle.
And the path to optimizing it is so highly personal.
Yeah.
It depends completely on your own energy profile. So now we want to leave you with a question that uses the analytical tools we've provided today. We've discussed actions that are invigorating, therapeutic, or even essential evils.
So think about the different parts of your own day. That physical shock of a cold shower, maybe? The mental clearing of a commute? That focused escape of a game or a book, or the active creation of cooking a meal?
Which specific part of your daily routine do you find most therapeutic and why?
And really consider its essential function. Is it about restoring your mental balance? Is it facilitating creativity? Or is it a necessary evil that allows you to be more productive later on?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the decoded rituals of daily life. We hope this knowledge helps you not only optimize your day, but also articulate your own existence with absolute clarity and sophistication.
We look forward to diving deep with you next time. Okay, let's get into this. So if you've been on this journey with us, you'll know that the last time we looked at productivity, we were kind of like architecture critics.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
We talked all about building the perfect framework, designing that optimal structure, and really defining the what and the when of an ideal daily routine.
Exactly. We laid the foundations. But as we all know, a beautiful blueprint is, well, it's pretty useless if the builders never show up.
Exactly. And that is precisely why today we're shifting our focus pretty dramatically.
A big shift.
Yeah, we are moving beyond the timetable, beyond the color-coded spreadsheets, and we are sort of going to war with our own minds.
I like that framing.
Our mission today is to really delve into the necessary and sometimes, let's be honest, brutal psychological warfare that's required to actually execute that routine day after day.
We're making a transition from the architecture of your day to the internal operating system of your brain.
Yeah.
The deep dive today is all about the how and the why of execution.
Yep.
How do we sustainably move past procrastination when a task feels just dreadful? Why does our focus seem to fragment the second we need it most?
And maybe the biggest question of all.
This is the critical one. How do we make sure this relentless pursuit of output and efficiency doesn't just lead to, well, total cognitive collapse and burnout?
This is such a crucial distinction. We're not really talking about time management anymore. That's about treating the hours in the day like a scarce resource you have to control.
Oh, this is different.
We're talking about energy management, attention management. It's about managing your mind, your focus, and, your limits. Because here's the core challenge, and I think every single person listening right now has lived this.
Absolutely.
Outlining the perfect, hyper-optimized routine. That part's easy. That's an hour of planning, maybe.
But then Monday morning hits. You're faced with that one dreadful, complex, or just overwhelming task.
Yeah.
And suddenly, summoning the sheer internal energy, the willpower to actually stick to that beautifully crafted routine, it feels genuinely impossible.
It does. You know exactly what needs to be done. The instruction manual is right there, open, and yet you are static, frozen.
That specific point of friction, that psychological resistance between your intention and your action, that's where productivity really lives or dies.
So we need to explore what that resistance is and develop strategies that, I guess, bypass that overthinking part of the brain and just force some momentum.
Right. That gap between knowing and doing is maybe the most important space in modern work.
So where do we start?
Let's jump right into that first and highest hurdle. The friction of just starting. Because so often our productivity struggles aren't about capability or intellect or resources. They're about the inability to just initiate that very first step.
It's the mental weight of beginning, isn't it? It often feels heavier than the actual difficulty of the task itself. We waste so much energy just fighting the start button.
And we need a formal definition for this incredibly common universal experience. Our sources call it analysis paralysis.
That's the perfect term for it.
It really is, because it captures the active nature of the stagnation. This isn't just, laziness. It is a mental prison you build for yourself out of good intentions.
Oh, I'm so profoundly prone to this. You have this huge high-stakes project. Say, you need to write a complex 50-page report.
Right.
Or maybe you have to plan a 3-week international move, or something even simpler, like figuring out which savings account is truly the best one. Instead of just jumping in and doing the first necessary step, you spend 3 hours on what you could call secondary activities.
And that is the absolute hallmark of analysis paralysis. It's that state where overthinking or overanalyzing or over-optimizing a situation becomes so intense that it completely prevents you from making a decision or taking any kind of decisive action.
You're intellectually engaged, but practically you're just frozen.
Completely frozen.
Yeah.
Let's break down where this actually shows up, because it isn't just about professional work. The sources point out it can happen across really 3 distinct domains. So first, you have the professional context. You need to start that report. So what do? You spend 2 hours researching the absolute best software for outlining.
Or comparing font readability.
Exactly. Or creating 4 different file structures before you've written a single sentence. The preparation becomes a substitute for the performance.
Right. And then second, the personal context. Planning a vacation is a great example of this.
The classic.
You spend days, literally days, analyzing every single potential flight option, reading 50 reviews for 10 different hotels, comparing 3 different travel insurance policies, and by the end, you have so much data, you feel less capable of booking anything than when you started.
You were trying to optimize for perfection, and all you achieved was stagnation.
And the third one?
The third is the modern digital context, which is maybe the most insidious version of this. It's the optimization loop.
Oh, no, I know this one.
You spend an entire Saturday reading about the best productivity system, -GTD, Kanban, Notion templates, and you try to implement the perfect organizational structure instead of actually doing the task that you need to organize in the first place.
It's a fascinating but just terrible psychological loop, isn't it? The more you overthink and analyze all the potential pitfalls, the bigger the task seems to get.
Right. And the scarier the consequences of making a mistake seem. The longer you stare at that frog, frozen, the less likely you are to take the necessary risk of just starting.
So we're using all this cognitive energy to worry about future steps, the potential for error, the consequences of failure, instead of just applying that energy to the one manageable step right in front of us.
And the irony, as the sources point out, is that your brain is often trying to be helpful. It's trying to ensure you have maximal efficiency or minimal error, but the outcome is just total guaranteed inaction.
So you're trading a potential failure or a slight imperfection for a guaranteed stagnation. The way out isn't more analysis. It's a simple, kind of brute force strategy designed to bypass that analytical mind entirely.
And just get the body moving.
Exactly.
Which brings us directly to the counter strategy for analysis paralysis, which was popularized by the work of Brian Tracy, and it's built on a Mark Twain quote. It's called eating the frog.
And we should probably reassure everyone listening, no amphibians are harmed in this process.
No, absolutely not. The frog is just a metaphor for that one. Single, most difficult, most dreadful, complex, or important task that's looming over your day.
So it's the task you are most likely to put off or overanalyze or just hide from.
And the execution is remarkably simple. You eat the frog first thing in the morning.
Okay.
Before you check your email, before you respond to texts, before you let all the day's little distractions pollute your focus, you tackle that monster task. You spend your highest energy resources on your highest value activity.
Now, the psychological benefit here is it's multifaceted and it's really profound. First, if you actually succeed in tackling the hardest task right away, you completely prevent it from casting a shadow over the rest of your day.
Yes, that constant low-grade dread, that feeling of knowing that terrible thing is still waiting for you, it's just gone, eliminated by 9 a.m.
And that psychological relief is a huge boost. The weight is lifted, and the rest of the day, by comparison, genuinely feels so much easier.
You banked a major win before the day has even really started. And that creates an immediate momentum that can carry you through all the easier, shallower tasks that are left.
Okay, but this is where we have to pause and bring up a critical point for anyone listening. What if the frog is a whale?
Good question.
What if the task is so enormous, like writing a whole book or coding a massive application, that even the thought of starting it causes that analysis paralysis all over again? This is where I think the simple eat the frog strategy can actually fail for some people. It can increase the friction.
That's a crucial insight, and we absolutely have to address it. For those truly enormous tasks, just staring at the whole frog might be paralyzing in itself.
So what do you do?
The sources strongly suggest that for these situations, you have to move from eating the frog to slicing the frog.
Slicing the frog, okay.
It means you break that single enormous task into tiny, manageable micro commitments. So instead of telling yourself, I have to write all of chapter 3 today, you just say, I will write the title and the first paragraph.
That's a really sophisticated psychological trick. You're deliberately lowering the activation energy that's required to start.
Exactly. The goal isn't to finish the task. The goal is just to start the task. And the smaller the commitment, the easier it is to bypass that analytical mind.
By committing to just, say, 15 minutes, you reduce the perceived risk and the mental investment.
And we all know what happens next, right?
But of course, most of the time, once you've written the title and that first paragraph, the friction of staying in motion is so much less than the friction of starting from a complete standstill.
You often find yourself working for 45 minutes or an hour, not because you forced yourself, but because you tricked your brain into momentum using a tiny, non-threatening starting commitment.
So the rule becomes, if the frog is a manageable size, eat it whole right away.
But if the frog is so intimidating that it invites analysis paralysis, slice it. Slice it into tiny, psychologically easy pieces and just commit to consuming that first slice.
In either case, decisive action is the antidote to stagnation.
Absolutely.
So once we've successfully eaten or sliced the frog and we've moved past that initial friction of starting, the next big hurdle isn't just about being active or busy, it's about maintaining the quality of concentration you need to actually produce high-value work.
Activity is such a poor metric for productivity. So many people mistake effort for output. The critical factor is the intensity of your focus. And this is where we have to transition from managing the start to mastering what's called deep work.
This concept comes from the work of Cal Newport, right? He has this highly influential framework.
That's the one. He argues that in our modern knowledge economy, most people are just stuck doing what he calls shallow work.
So that's things like answering routine emails, attending low-impact meetings, administrative tasks that don't really require much cognitive effort.
Precisely. And deep work is the polar opposite. It refers to professional activities that are performed in a state of absolute, distraction-free concentration, the kind of work that fundamentally pushes your cognitive capabilities to their limits.
So it's the effort that creates new value, improves your skills, and it's really difficult for technology or other people to just replicate.
Think of the difference. Shallow work is sending 50 emails over 2 hours. Deep work is spending those same 2 hours crafting a single, truly original, complex argument that maybe uses those emails as a foundation.
Or designing a novel solution to a problem that has resisted previous attempts. The first one is easy, low cognitive input. The second is creatively demanding and high output.
And why is mastering this skill becoming so rare and so valuable? Because we live in a constant interruption-driven economy.
Everything is designed to pull us away.
Our devices, our platforms, even our work environments, they're all meticulously designed to fragment our attention into these tiny, easily consumable pieces. The ability to voluntarily disconnect and just focus for a sustained period is becoming increasingly rare.
Which means automatically it's becoming an invaluable commodity in the marketplace.
If you can reliably tap into deep work, you immediately gain a significant competitive advantage no matter what your field is.
But the structure of deep work, it's not a one-size-fits-all model, is it? The sources mention that people use different kinds of scheduling approaches based on their own professional constraints.
That's a key layer of detail for our listeners to understand. Newport identified 4 common ways people schedule deep work.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, there's the monastic philosophy. This is the most extreme form. The individual tries to maximize deep work by eliminating shallow obligations almost entirely.
So you're thinking of like a reclusive academic or a novelist who moves to a cabin in the woods.
Exactly. It's great for pure concentration, but let's be real, it's completely unrealistic for 99% of modern professionals.
Definitely. What's next?
Then there's the bimodal philosophy. This requires you to separate your time into distinct blocks. So you might have one block where you're completely engaged in deep work, say a full week dedicated solely to writing away from the office, and the rest of your time is for all those shallow obligations like meetings and emails.
So it's an alternating isolation strategy, a bit more practical?
A bit. But even more practical for most people is the rhythmic philosophy. This is the strategy of creating a non-negotiable daily deep work block.
So you set aside, say, 90 minutes every single morning, and you rigorously protect that time.
You do. This integrates deep work into your life seamlessly without demanding these radical lifestyle changes.
And the last one.
And finally, there's the journalistic philosophy. This is the most flexible, and it relies on opportunistic deep work sessions that you squeeze in whenever your schedule allows.
So meeting gets canceled, and you immediately pivot into a deep work task.
Right. But while it's flexible, it requires extreme mental discipline to switch gears that instantly.
So the big takeaway here is that you need a deep work strategy that actually matches your life. If you don't schedule it, the shallow work, the emails, the instant messages will schedule it for you.
And that rhythmic approach is often the most accessible starting point for people looking to integrate high-intensity focus.
So how do we practically enforce this rhythmic, high-level, distraction-free concentration? The sources seem to consistently recommend one specific and highly effective technique.
They do. It's called time blocking.
This technique is basically creating scheduled, isolated chambers of concentration in your day.
It's not just about putting work on report on your to-do list. It's about scheduling a specific time slot on your actual calendar labeled deep work, report draft, no exceptions.
And the recommended format specifically for deep work involves setting aside these 90-minute windows dedicated to just one focused task.
And that duration isn't arbitrary. It's based on research into human ultradian rhythms, which suggests our brains cycle through these high-focus phases that last roughly 90 to 120 minutes.
So 90 minutes is long enough to get past that initial resistance and achieve a true state of flow, but it's short enough that you avoid cognitive fatigue and diminishing returns.
Right. And the rules for this time block must be strict. Ruthless, even.
The sources are absolutely clear on this. This is a digital exclusion zone. Absolutely no phone, no notifications, no emails, no web browsing outside of what's required for the task, just the task at hand.
You're creating a physical and a digital boundary around your concentration. You are telling the world, and maybe more importantly, you're telling your own easily distracted brain that for the next 90 minutes, nothing else exists except this one cognitive endeavor.
It forces you to prioritize creation over reaction. And that's the foundational mindset shift of true productivity.
It really is.
But I need to challenge this for a minute because 90 minutes is a long time, especially for someone who's currently operating on, 10-minute bursts of fragmented attention. Do the sources offer any strategies for shorter sprints, especially for people just starting out?
They absolutely do. The concept of ruthless focus can feel intimidating, which is why techniques like the Pomodoro technique, which uses 25-minute sprints followed by a short break, can serve as excellent training wheels for deep work.
Ah, that makes sense. So Pomodoro trains the muscle of discipline, the ability to focus intently for a short, protected period of time.
And once that muscle is stronger, you extend the period to the 90-minute deep work block to really capitalize on that cognitive flow state.
But both techniques share that central principle. The time block has to be sacred and absolutely distraction-free.
The common thread is the boundary. Whether it's 25 minutes or 90 minutes, you're committing to a zero-tolerance policy for distraction. You're ensuring that when you are working, you are maximizing the intensity of that work.
Speaking of maximizing intensity, we have to talk about the great destroyer of deep work, the most persistent myth in the modern office.
Multitasking.
Multitasking. The belief that doing multiple things at the same time is somehow efficient is so pervasive, but the sources and, neurological reality absolutely debunked this. It's a catastrophic failure of attention management.
This is such a critical psychological and neurological distinction. The human brain is a highly sophisticated serial processor. It processes streams of information sequentially.
So you're saying individuals are not doing two things at once?
No. They are merely rapidly switching their attention between two or more streams of information.
Think of your attention like the RAM in a computer. Every time you switch tasks, from drafting a document to checking an email notification to reading a text message, your brain has to shut down the file it was working on, load the context of the new file, briefly address it, and then try to reload the context of the original document.
And this constant context switching is devastating. Every single time you switch, you incur what's called a switch cost. It's a small cognitive penalty where you lose time and energy simply reorienting yourself.
I've seen the research on this. Some sources suggest this context switching can result in a measurable time penalty of anywhere between 20 and 40% efficiency loss?
That's right, a 20 to 40% loss for the total task duration.
That's a staggering figure. So if you think you're saving time by answering emails while you're listening to a meeting, you are actually throwing away a quarter to nearly half of your productive capacity just because of the friction of switching back and forth.
You are systematically fragmenting your attention.
And fragmenting your attention means breaking your focus into these small, discontinuous pieces.
Which inevitably degrades your performance on all the tasks you're trying to do.
Yeah.
The quality of your output diminishes because your brain is constantly having to reload context. And that leads to more errors, superficial thinking, and a profound inability to get into a true flow state.
And what does this constant switching cost us in terms of psychological currency?
It dramatically increases what experts call cognitive load.
Cognitive load. Okay, define that for us.
Cognitive load is the total amount of mental effort that's currently being used in your working memory. When you rapidly switch tasks from a complicated spreadsheet to a client query to listening to background noise and back again, your brain is expending an immense amount of energy just on those transitions, just managing all the open tabs in your head.
It's that feeling of having 20 browser tabs open at once, even though you only need to read one. Your mental operating system just slows to a crawl.
And this rapid forced switching significantly increases that overall cognitive load, which is why the sources point out that it leads directly to faster exhaustion and ultimately to burnout.
That real-world example we noted is so powerful. That feeling of being completely drained after a day of trying to handle complicated inventory while also managing a barrage of customer emails.
You might feel incredibly busy, like you've earned that exhaustion.
But you're not feeling productive, you're feeling frayed.
Exactly. And that feeling of being frayed and exhausted is the direct cost of that cognitive load. You spent more psychological energy on managing the switch costs and the performance degradation than you did on the actual tasks themselves.
So recognizing the multitasking myth is the foundational first step toward protecting your cognitive energy and making deep work even possible. You have to stop trying to do two things poorly and just commit to doing one thing well.
So we've learned how to start and how to focus. But why are so many people constantly running at full speed, relentlessly trying to force this high-level focus and volume of tasks all the time, even outside of those protected deep work blocks?
And that brings us to the external pressure, the thing that drives this unsustainable behavior. We have to address the systemic toxicity of what's known as hustle culture. This is where the discussion moves from structural advice into a necessary societal critique.
It has to.
We are living under this unrelenting external pressure, especially amplified in digital spaces and professional networking circles, that dictates that perpetual activity equals personal virtue and economic necessity.
It's a pervasive societal narrative that promotes being productive 24/7. It's the pressure that suggests if you aren't monetizing your hobbies, if you aren't working a side hustle every weekend to build passive income, then you're somehow wasting your life or failing to achieve your maximal potential.
And it operates on the psychological loop of guilt. It tells you that if you're just reading a book for pleasure or walking without a destination or simply resting, you're being inefficient.
It creates a perpetual scarcity mindset around time and activity, and it fosters this intense guilt whenever you choose leisure or non-monetizable rest.
This culture is rooted in the belief that personal worth is tied directly to your output and your economic utility. It forces the cognitive engine to run constantly, blurring the lines between personal time and professional necessity until they are just indistinguishable.
And it's amplified by the curated and often misleading social media portrayal of others who seem to be effortlessly achieving 120% efficiency at all times.
The sources are very clear in labeling this culture as incredibly toxic. And the reason is simple. It sets an impossible biological standard. The human brain and body cannot sustain that kind of high-level output without commensurate structured rest. It's just not possible.
And when you attempt to do so, the consequence is inevitable. It's predictable.
The consequence is structural fatigue that spirals into burnout.
This toxic pressure treats the human mind like it's a machine, capable of infinite high-speed processing. It completely ignores the biological reality of energy depletion, of hormonal cycles, and the necessity of emotional regulation. When you deny that reality long enough, the system just breaks down catastrophically.
And that breakdown is what we call burnout. We have to define this critical state because it is so much more serious than just being tired after a long week.
The sources describe burnout as insidious. And that word choice is very precise. Insidious means it proceeds in a gradual, subtle way, but with profoundly harmful, often unseen effects.
So it doesn't just strike suddenly in a flash of obvious exhaustion.
No, it creeps up on you over months or even years, slowly eroding your capacity and your motivation.
And it starts deceptively, which is why it's so dangerous. You rationalize the early signs. You tell yourself, oh, I just need a weekend break, or I just need a vacation.
But that simple tiredness is just the precursor to structural fatigue. The symptoms escalate far beyond simple physical fatigue.
The World Health Organization actually defines burnout by 3 dimensions, right?
That's right. The first is feelings of emotional exhaustion, just feeling depleted of all your emotional resources. The second is cynicism or detachment from one's job, the mind trying to create distance to protect itself. And the third is a reduced sense of personal accomplishment.
That second one, detachment and cynicism, that feels like the key differentiator from just being stressed.
It is. When you're just stressed, you usually care too much. In burnout, the individual feels completely detached and cynical about their work. They lose that sense of meaning or purpose they once got from their career.
The cynicism is the mind basically saying, I have invested everything, the return is not worth the cost, so I am removing my emotional participation entirely.
That emotional and psychological distance from your own responsibilities is the clinical hallmark of established burnout. It's a slow, quiet, deep erosion of motivation, of connection, and ultimately of your identity.
How can we actually recognize when our detachment is structural burnout versus just having a bad month?
It comes down to consistency and scope. Temporary stress is situational. You're cynical about a specific client or a deadline. Burnout cynicism is structural. You're detached from your entire field, your entire career, and often your entire future direction.
So a good indicator is that persistent feeling that your efforts are meaningless, even when you achieve success.
Exactly. If a major win doesn't feel rewarding at all, you are likely detached. That detachment is the signal that your cognitive energy reserves are not just low, they are structurally broken and in desperate need of comprehensive repair.
And to combat that insidious creep and the structural failure of burnout, we have to fundamentally shift how we understand our non-working hours. We need to embrace this counterintuitive principle of sustainable productivity.
Which is the profound necessity of rest.
Exactly. The hustle culture narrative views rest as a failure of ambition, or at best, a necessary evil, a concession to biological weakness.
We have to actively and aggressively reframe that belief based on cognitive science. The sources are clear. Rest is not time wasted. It is a vital physiological necessity for maintaining performance and cognitive function.
You can't perform deep work if your brain is constantly running on empty. And we should get into the specific mechanics of why rest works. It's more than just taking a break.
Well, when you're performing high-intensity cognitive work, your brain rapidly consumes glucose and ATP, which is the molecular currency of energy. Rest, especially high-quality sleep, is when the brain chemically restores these neural resources. You are literally refueling the cognitive engine.
And intense cognitive work also produces metabolic byproducts, right?
It does. The brain's waste clearance system, known as the glymphatic system, becomes highly active during deep sleep. It flushes out neurotoxins and waste proteins that can interfere with your neural signaling and concentration.
So if you skip rest, you're running the engine while simultaneously allowing sludge to build up.
It's a perfect analogy. Rest is also essential for memory consolidation. During non-waking hours, your brain is consolidating the information you learned during the day, transferring it from short-term to long-term memory. If you skip this, you aren't truly learning, you're just experiencing.
And in fact, the most highly productive people are demonstrably not the ones who work the longest hours. They're the ones who manage their energy and attention most effectively, respecting those physiological boundaries.
Prioritizing rest is not a luxury. It is the most crucial, high-leverage activity you can schedule to maintain the integrity of your cognitive system and ensure career longevity.
So if rest is that vital and burnout is that insidious, how do we practically enforce the boundaries that protect that necessary downtime? This so often centers on the psychological barrier or the lack of one between the freedom of the weekend and the demands of the work week.
And this brings us to a specific, almost cultural, modern psychological phenomenon that's tied directly to the blurring of those work-life boundaries.
I think we all recognize the term immediately, the Sunday scaries. It's a shorthand for a shared experience of dread.
It is. It's the colloquial term for that anxiety and dread that sets in on Sunday afternoon or evening about the upcoming work week. It's that feeling of the weekend running out and the crushing weight of Monday's demands just starting to settle over you like a cold cloud.
And the sources are great at explaining the simple behavioral mechanism behind this dread, and it usually starts with the simplest, most tempting modern habit.
Check in work email on Sunday.
Checking work email on Sunday. It might just be a quick glance, but that immediate digital link back to the professional sphere just instantly triggers worry and anxiety about Monday.
The minute you see a notification or read a quick message about a pending issue, your brain switches instantaneously from that restorative, relaxed mode to problem-solving, threat assessment, anticipation mode.
The cognitive load just spikes violently, and the hard-won mental distance of the weekend vanishes.
You essentially trade the last few hours of peace for several hours of low-grade anticipatory stress. You haven't solved any problems, but you've mentally pulled yourself out of restoration and back into that high-friction pre-work state.
We call that re-entry anxiety.
And that re-entry anxiety is often worse than the actual work itself, because on Sunday, you have all the worry, but none of the capacity to act. You're sitting with unresolved problems that you can't yet execute a solution for, which only heightens the psychological distress.
So the damage isn't done by the work itself, but by the anticipatory worry it generates during your designated rest period. So to fight back against the scaries and reclaim our weekend peace, a strict, deliberate boundary is required. The sources detail a highly effective strategy.
The Sunday digital detox.
The Sunday digital detox. And this requires a clear, non-negotiable rule.
The strict boundary is a complete digital detox on Sundays, meaning no work-related communication, no checking company platforms, and certainly no glancing at the inbox. This has to be treated as a hard, professional boundary.
The emphasis here is on creating a restorative buffer zone between the enjoyment of the weekend and the inevitable demands of the work week. You are proactively telling Monday that it has to wait until its designated start time.
It's an act of proactive self-protection for your long-term cognitive sustainability.
Think of this buffer zone as necessary psychological decompression. Just like you wouldn't throw a delicate piece of machinery immediately from high heat into freezing cold, you need a transitional space between high-intensity cognitive stress and deep rest.
And the digital detox provides that psychological transition. It allows your nervous system to fully regulate and reset before the next onslaught of cognitive load begins.
It's about controlled anxiety. By enforcing the digital detox, you are essentially training your brain that worry about work is strictly confined to business hours when you actually have the tools and resources to address the issues.
That training is key. You're not ignoring the work. You're simply postponing the cognitive activation until the appropriate time. You are replacing anticipatory worry with structural discipline, which is a powerful lever for reducing baseline stress levels throughout the week.
So, if we've successfully implemented the digital detox, what should fill that precious Sunday buffer zone? Certainly not shallow work or activities that mimic the stress of the week, like binge watching a high-stakes drama or scrolling social media feeds that spike your anxiety.
The time must be focused on activities that genuinely restore energy, rather than draining it. We need activities that leverage the restorative power of low cognitive demand tasks, things that relax the prefrontal cortex, which is the seat of our deep work capacity.
The sources offer some specific examples. One is walking in nature. This is backed by scientific theories like attention restoration theory, or RT.
Which suggests that exposure to nature provides a gentle, soft focus that allows the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for directed, intensive attention, to recover from fatigue. You don't have to concentrate hard, but your senses are gently engaged.
Other restorative activities include cooking, especially a complicated recipe that requires concentration but not problem-solving related to your job, or reading fiction.
These are immersion activities. They engage the senses or allow for contemplation without requiring the intense, focused attention of deep work or the high cognitive load of decision-making.
The key differentiating factor is that these activities provide a sense of control and accomplishment. The soup turns out well, the chapter is finished, without adding pressure to perform, optimize, or monetize.
They are inherently leisurely pursuits, completely divorced from output metrics and that hustle culture narrative. They allow the brain to switch from doer mode to absorber mode.
They are inputs, not outputs. We spend all week focused on outputs and metrics. Restoration requires shifting the mindset entirely to input-absorbing peace, nature, story, and flavor to chemically and psychologically recharge the system.
All of these individual strategies, from the brute force start of eating the frog to the focused intensity of deep work and the necessary enforcement of the digital detox, they all lead us to one ultimate takeaway.
A philosophy of longevity.
A philosophy of longevity. Productivity should not be measured purely by immediate output. It must be measured by the ability to sustain that output over a lifetime.
And the principle reinforced by the sources is that structured rest and complete unplugging are the only reliable ways to maintain that longevity in any career path.
If you are constantly depleted, cycling through structural burnout and recovery, your overall 10-year output will be significantly lower, and the quality of your work will be diminished compared to the person who works intensely for protected periods and then rests completely and unapologetically.
The person who rests completely during the buffer zone is the marathon runner. The person who constantly checks email and maintains 247 low-grade stress is the sprinter who pulls a hamstring on the first mile of a 10-mile race.
High performance demands deep recovery.
And this leads us to a fundamental shift in our understanding of what productivity even means in the first place, moving away from activity volume towards strategic efficiency and life quality.
The sources conclude this section by giving us a powerful new definition that really ties all these threads together. And that new definition is this: productivity is not about doing more things. It is about doing the right things so strategically and so intensely that you have sufficient time left to truly live your life outside of professional obligation.
It's a definition based on efficiency, boundary, and life quality, not just on activity volume. You're working to live, not living to work.
We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, shifting the conversation entirely from, structural time management to deep, nuanced cognitive strategy. Before we wrap up, let's briefly synthesize the powerful vocabulary we've acquired, just to make sure we've cemented these concepts into your mental toolkit.
Okay. We started with the problem of stopping before we even start, that psychological prison we defined as analysis, paralysis, overthinking that substitutes preparation for execution.
Then we talked about the solution to low-quality output, deep work. That professional activity performed with distraction-free concentration that pushes your cognitive limits, making your work rare and valuable.
And the enemy of deep work, we learned, is the neurological reality of trying to multitask, which results in fragmenting attention, breaking your focus into small pieces that drastically degrade performance and increase that costly mental currency, cognitive load.
When we were discussing the dangers of hustle culture, we characterized burnout using the precise term insidious, meaning it proceeds in a gradual, subtle, but profoundly harmful way, leading to that clinical hallmark of cynical detachment.
And finally, we addressed the cultural anxiety around downtime and boundary failure by naming the Sunday scaries, that dread felt on Sunday afternoon when the required buffer zone has been destroyed by anticipatory work worry.
That is a comprehensive psychological toolkit for maximizing your execution capacity. Now let's leave you with one final provocative thought that ties together the concepts of starting friction and long-term cognitive sustainability.
We introduced the idea of eating the frog, doing the hardest, most dreadful task first thing in the morning to get that psychological win and build momentum.
But as we discussed, the alternative is often starting with several easy tasks, just to build that psychological momentum and feel an immediate sense of accomplishment.
Right. And this choice, frog versus easy wins, is usually framed as just a simple preference or a motivational trick. But if we connect this back to our deep discussion of cognitive load and the insidious nature of burnout, we realize the choice is, well, it's far deeper than mere preference.
So we ask you this. When you choose between eating the frog and starting easy to build momentum, are you prioritizing immediate psychological relief, that short-term gratification of a quick win, or are you prioritizing long-term cognitive sustainability?
The easy win approach might feel good in the moment, but it often just delays the high-load work until later in the day when your cognitive resources are already depleted.
Whereas the frog approach demands high energy early, but protects your focus for the rest of the day. So which path ensures that you maintain the required undiminished deep work capacity for the years ahead, and which path simply feeds the short-term demand for activity, perhaps increasing your overall cognitive debt in the process?
That's the question worth spending your mental energy on this week. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the psychology of execution. Stay mindful of your focus and enjoy Buffer Zone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. We've all had that feeling, right? You're in a conversation, and on paper, everything is fine. The words are correct, the grammar is perfect, but there's just something that feels off. Maybe you said the right thing, but at the completely wrong time, or maybe you just missed some kind of subtle cue that was just hanging there in the air.
Right. You walk away from it thinking, what just happened? Why did that feel so weird?
Exactly. So today, we are really going to try and tackle that invisible glue that holds everything together. Structure, productivity, even our leisure time. We're talking about communication. But we're going way beyond syntax and semantics. Yeah. We're diving deep into the nuance.
And that is absolutely the mission for this deep dive. Our whole analysis is centered on what are, rightly called advanced communication skills. This is the kind of mastery that takes you way beyond just technical proficiency.
It's not about vocabulary lists.
No, absolutely not. This isn't about whether you can construct a perfect sentence in the passive voice or if you've memorized the latest corporate jargon. We are specifically going to be talking about soft skills, social dynamics, and that C2 level ability to, truly read the room.
And I think for you, for the listener who is really dedicated to learning this stuff quickly and thoroughly, getting a handle on these mechanics is it's essential. Mastering this is, it's kind of a shortcut to better situational awareness, to being more effective. Think about it. If you're negotiating a high-stakes contract, or you're meeting new friends, or even just trying to figure out if your presentation landed correctly, understanding these social mechanics, it gives you the blueprint for how to engage.
It really does. What we're trying to do here is take that implied knowledge, that thing that feels like instinct, and turn it into something explicit, a repeatable strategy.
Right.
So the task is really to synthesize the core concepts of advanced communication and to grasp the essential diplomacy and subtext you need for real, for true understanding.
Okay, so let's start with that phrase you just used because it's so fundamental. reading the room.
Hmm.
It's an idiom we hear all the time, but if you actually stop and ask someone, okay, what does that mean precisely? The definition gets fuzzy.
It does. It gets very vague.
It feels elusive, almost instinctual, but what actually makes up that instinct?
Well, the documents we looked at, they give a really clear and formal definition for it. They position reading the room as a vital, almost an operational component of emotional intelligence, or EQ.
Ah, okay. So it's directly tied to EQ.
Directly. If you think of EQ as, the capacity to be aware of and control your own emotions and to handle relationships with empathy, then reading the room is kind of like the radar system.
The radar system, I like that.
Yeah, it's the thing that's gathering all the necessary data for those relationships to even function in the first place.
So it's not just about, feeling a general vibe. It's an active process. It's social data acquisition.
That's a great way to put it. Active social data acquisition and processing. And you asked what we're processing.
Yeah, what's the data?
Well, you're processing dozens of these tiny data points all at once. And often it's completely unconscious, and it's happening incredibly fast. We're talking about micro expressions, those really fleeting changes in facial muscles that might signal stress or discomfort.
Things you might not even consciously notice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have the bigger nonverbal cues. Posture, for example. Are people's arms crossed? Are their hands open or clenched? How close are they standing to each other? You're also gauging energy levels. Is the group sort of lethargic and tired, or are they really tense? Or maybe they're buzzing with a focused excitement. And this one is critical. You're measuring the duration of silence. Is the quiet in the room comfortable and reflective? Or is it really tense and signaling that a conflict is about to happen?
Wow.
You take all of those inputs and you synthesize them into this cohesive real-time picture of the social atmosphere.
That sounds like a really heavy cognitive load when you break it down like that. It's situational awareness, but made active and really granular. And so the failure to process all that data, the failure to read the room, that's what leads to the classic social foul, the cringe moment. Can you walk us through a more detailed example of what that failure looks like?
Oh, absolutely. Let's imagine a small startup team. It's a classic scenario. They've been working around the clock. They just missed a huge, crucial deadline, and the atmosphere in their meeting is just heavy. It's full of this shared guilt and exhaustion.
I can picture it.
So everyone is exhibiting closed body language, right? Arms are crossed, shoulders are hunched. There's very little eye contact. The air is just thick with tension.
Right.
Now, a manager walks in late, and this manager hasn't really been in the trenches with them. They don't get the depth of the crunch they've been through. So they misread the silence. They think it's, anticipation.
Yeah.
And they decide they need to lighten the mood.
Oh, no. I can see where this is going.
Yeah. So they walk in and loudly declare something like, "All right, team, who needs a caffeine AV? I saw the mess you guys made of the vending machine last night. You look like you went 12 rounds of the bear. Anyone got weekend plans for recovery?"
That's disastrous.
That's a whole disaster.
The intent might have been totally harmless, right? Just trying to bring some levity. But the impact is just a complete breach of the emotional state of that room.
Exactly. The joke isn't just contextually inappropriate. It actively signals a profound lack of empathy.
It's trivializing.
It's totally trivializing their shared stress and their feeling of failure. So failing to read the room, it creates this immediate and often deep social friction. Successful communication, it seems, is often less about the sheer brilliance of what you say and more about just making sure your contribution accommodates the existing emotional reality rather than just clashing with it. Situational awareness prevents you from making these kinds of empathy void social fouls.
And this is where I think we really move into that C2 level application, because situational awareness isn't just about, adjusting your volume or your timing. It's about grasping the subtext, what's being communicated between the lines. For advanced English mastery, deciphering subtext is it's non-negotiable.
It is the ultimate test of fluency, isn't it?
Yeah.
Technical vocabulary lets you decode the words on the page. Social fluency lets you decode the actual meaning behind them. Take sarcasm. It's a communication tool that relies almost entirely on subtext.
Right. The literal meaning is the exact opposite of the intended meaning.
Exactly. So if a senior colleague says, in this really flat, dragged-out tone, "Oh, that 6-hour systems outage was just a marvelous opportunity for reflection and team building."
Yeah, right.
The subtext, which is carried entirely by that tone in the context of a total disaster, is clearly signaling severe frustration or, deep irony.
And what about the opposite? What about understatement, saying something like, the CEO was a bit perturbed by the quarterly results?
When in reality,
the CEO had a full-blown meltdown and fired 3 people. The sophisticated listener has to be able to gauge that vast emotional distance between the modest language and the dramatic reality.
and we have to recognize the linguistic markers that signal these things. Sarcasm often involves that exaggerated choice of positive adjectives, right? Brilliant, marvelous, fantastic. But they're delivered with that noticeably flat or falling intonation. The tone completely contradicts the word choice.
And for understatement.
Understatement often leans on softening adverbs, like slightly, a bit, just, or these minimizing phrases that are used to diminish a huge impact.
This is so key. I mean, if a native speaker uses a really formal grammatical structure, like inversion, they say, never have I seen such brilliance after some catastrophic failure, the advanced learner has to instantly recognize that this really formal structure, combined with that ironic context, is signaling intense criticism, not actual praise.
Absolutely. Understanding those nuances is what moves communication from a purely technical skill like translating a document to true social fluency. You're not just translating English words anymore. You're translating human emotion and intent.
The text is only the skeleton.
That's a perfect analogy. The text is the skeleton. The subtext carried by tone and irony and context, that's the living, breathing meaning that defines the whole social dynamic.
And that necessity of decoding human emotion brings us right to the architecture of conversation itself. And I feel like I have to mention this observation from the source material because I think a lot of us can relate to it. It's that common personal preference, or maybe it's an impatience, with small talk, discussing the weather, the traffic.
The benign daily routines.
Yes, exactly. It can feel incredibly tedious. The impulse is always to just bypass that surface level and jump right into the big stuff, ideas, philosophy, real experiences.
And that desire for efficiency, for depth, it's completely understandable, especially for highly motivated learners and, professionals. That impulse is captured perfectly by the idiom, to cut to the chase.
Which means, of course, just skip the preamble, get straight to the essential point, and leave out all the unnecessary details. It's the language of the task-oriented communicator who really values time above all else.
And look, it is highly effective. If.
That's a big if.
There's a huge if. It's effective if you have already established a level of rapport and trust. However, if we're going to accept that communication is fundamentally about building relationships, whether they're professional or social, then we have to introduce a counterpoint to this idea that small talk is just purely tedious or inefficient.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. For the advanced learner, isn't spending time discussing the weather a topic with 0 stakes and almost 0 new information? Isn't that just a waste of intellectual energy? If I can articulate my goal clearly, why not just be direct and save everyone some time?
That efficiency argument is really compelling, I get it, but it fails to account for the emotional and social dimension of interaction. We have to argue that small talk serves a vital functional purpose, and the perspective we examined identifies it perfectly as a social lubricant.
A social lubricant. Okay, let's define that metaphor for our listeners. So if the conversation is an engine,
then the social lubricant is the oil that makes the moving parts, especially at the start run, smoother and with less awkward friction.
Got it.
Exactly. Small talk is this low-stakes opening ritual, but here's the key. It is not information-free. It allows both people to subconsciously assess a whole bunch of things: conversational style, energy level, basic levels of mutual interest, and crucially, psychological safety. It's a necessary form of gradualism. The social contract pretty much dictates that you cannot, ethically or appropriately, just walk up to a stranger and immediately ask about their deepest financial anxieties or their philosophical stance on mortality.
Because that would demand way too high a level of vulnerability or cognitive investment right out of the gate.
Right. The interaction becomes invasive.
And the whole relationship building process is sabotaged before it can even start. So the social lubricant, the small talk, it eases that transition from stranger to acquaintance.
And this gradual approach is absolutely essential for our next key term, defining and building rapport. Rapport, pronounced rapport, is really the ultimate goal of this initial phase of a conversation.
So what is it exactly?
It's a close and harmonious relationship where people truly understand each other's feelings or ideas and they communicate well. It's defined specifically by that feeling of connection and mutual trust.
And small talk provides the safe space to establish that.
Precisely.
Okay, so if small talk is the bridge and rapport is the destination, why do so many conversations still feel, I don't know, flat or incomplete? We've all been in that kind of exchange where you just walk away feeling fundamentally unheard.
This brings us to what might be the single most crucial distinction highlighted in the material. It's a concept that separates average communicators from the truly exceptional ones. The vast majority of people listen to reply rather than listening to understand.
Listening to reply? Wow, that strikes right at the core of our conversational anxiety, doesn't it?
It really does.
You're halfway through what the other person is saying, and your brain is already busy. It's formulating your rebuttal or your anecdote or your connection to their point. You're just waiting for them to stop talking so you can grab the conversational baton.
You're basically performing a cognitive dual task. You're trying to absorb just enough information to launch your next statement,
right,
while you're simultaneously composing that statement in your head. Your cognitive resources are completely diverted from deep absorption to self-serving composition.
And that diversion means you inevitably miss things.
You miss everything. You miss the subtle data points, the subtext we talked about, the tone, all the cues you need to successfully read the room.
Yeah.
The conversation becomes, as we said, just a series of adjacent monologues. It's not a true collaborative exchange.
Let me challenge that just a little bit. What about a really high-stakes, time-sensitive environment, like a complex negotiation with a ticking clock? Isn't it sometimes more efficient, maybe even necessary, to listen primarily to reply? So you can deploy a pre-planned counter-argument quickly instead of waiting for some deep emotional connection to form.
That's an excellent challenge. It really forces us to define the limits of this idea. Yeah. And yes, in a purely adversarial or transactional context, listening to reply might offer some short-term tactical efficiency. I'll grant you that. However, even in a negotiation, long-term success requires rapport. If your listening mode is permanently stuck on reply, you are going to miss that key piece of nonverbal information. The tiny sign of fatigue in their eyes, the momentary hesitation, the flicker of uncertainty.
The very thing that would allow you to strategically press your advantage.
Precisely. So even tactical advantage requires the deep data processing that only comes from listening to understand.
So the goal isn't just to talk, it's to influence.
Yes. And influence requires understanding the other person's underlying motivations, their fears, their goals. That mentality listening to reply is the silent chronic killer of genuine rapport and ultimately of long-term influence.
That distinction, it just leads us so naturally into a deeper dive on the act of listening itself. When someone is listening to reply, what they're really doing is engaging in passive listening. They are physically present, they might be nodding politely, but mentally they're just queuing up their next line. They're waiting for their turn to speak.
Passive listening is really the minimal viable effort of engagement. It's the bare minimum. It's often characterized by those perfunctory responses that show a clear lack of genuine absorption, saying while you're looking at your phone.
Or offering those bland, generic reassurances like, oh, that's interesting.
Exactly. The passive listener sees the conversation as kind of competition for talking time, not a collaborative exchange of ideas.
And so the goal for the advanced communicator has to be the opposite of that. It has to be active listening. And our source material makes it really clear this is not some passive trait you're born with. It's a deliberate, high-energy skill. It involves tangible actions that show engagement and understanding.
It takes energy and focus. And importantly, it's externally visible. You can see when someone is actively listening.
Okay, so let's break down the specific techniques that were mentioned because these feel really practical. These are measurable things that a learner can go out and practice right away.
For sure. Active listening requires you to demonstrate outwardly that you are deeply processing the information you're receiving.
And the first technique mentioned is mirroring body language. This one is so subtle. If you do it poorly, it just looks like you're mocking someone.
Right. It can be creepy if it's overdone.
But when it's done naturally, it involves subconsciously adopting a similar posture or energy or gestures as the speaker.
Think of it as a kind of nonverbal synchronization. It's a dance. So if the speaker leans forward to share something that's maybe confidential or intense, an active listener might subtly shift forward as well, just slightly reducing that physical space.
And what does that signal?
It creates this nonverbal sense of alignment. It signals, I am with you in this moment. I share this space with you. It contributes so much to building rapport because you're communicating trust and shared focus without even using words.
Okay, so that's mirroring. The second component is maintaining eye contact. And we should note this is highly culturally variable, right? The advanced communicator has to adapt. But generally, in most Western English-speaking settings, professional or social appropriate eye contact is crucial.
It really is. It communicates focus and investment. Too little eye contact can signal that you're distracted or uncomfortable or even shifty.
But too much is also a problem.
Oh, absolutely. Too much. And it shifts into aggressive staring, which just breaks rapport instantly. The key is engagement. You look at the speaker long enough to acknowledge their emotion and their words. Then you might break away for a brief moment to process, and then you return your gaze to show you're still attentive.
The cultural relativity here is just fascinating. For instance, an active listener in a business meeting in, say, Tokyo might show their attentiveness by focusing intently on their notebook or on a document.
Right. It's a sign of intense concentration.
Which is very different from the kind of intense, direct gaze that might be expected in a New York boardroom. The skill is reading the specific cultural room and then applying the right nonverbal cues.
Precisely. Now, the third component, and I would argue this is the most crucial intellectual part of it, is asking follow-up questions that genuinely show engagement.
This is the definitive metric, isn't it? This is the proof that you are actually listening to understand.
That's the ultimate proof.
We talked about the contrast. The passive response is generic. Oh, that's interesting. The active response has to be specific and context-aware.
Okay, let's elevate the complexity here for our C2 level learner.
Yeah.
Imagine a speaker is explaining a really complex 3-phase project rollout. And they mentioned that they faced these unanticipated regulatory hurdles in phase 2.
Okay.
The passive listener would just say, oh, that sounds annoying.
End of story.
But the advanced active listener, they construct a layered query, something like, given that the regulatory hurdles in phase 2 required such a severe operational pivot, what specific contingencies are you now building into the phase 3 timeline to preempt any potential secondary compliance delays?
Wow. That's a world of difference.
It's a huge difference.
That single question demonstrates that you absorbed the impact of phase 2, you understand why a contingency is needed for phase 3, and you're already thinking ahead strategically about risk management.
It validates the speaker's effort, and it encourages a much higher level of discourse. Active listening, when it's done correctly, means you are using your nonverbal cues and your intellectual curiosity to create a space where the speaker feels completely heard, validated, and respected.
But there's another element here that often causes immediate discomfort, especially in fast-paced English-speaking cultures, and that's silence.
Ah, yes. The awkward pause. The documents we reviewed really emphasize this. There's a pervasive cultural tendency in many English-speaking cultures to feel obligated to fill every single moment of silence.
We feel like we have to.
We do. And it stems from this perception that silence equals disapproval, or that the conversation is broken down, or just awkwardness. And that pressure inevitably leads to poor communication because people rush to say things they haven't fully thought through.
I know I have to consciously fight that reflex, just launching into filler phrases or repeating a point just to prevent that vacuum from opening up. But why is reframing silence so essential for an advanced communicator?
Because sometimes silence is not just necessary, it's valuable. It's valuable precisely because it is where the processing happens.
Where the processing happens.
If you are asked a complex strategic question, or if someone shares a difficult, emotionally charged thought with you, forcing an immediate verbal response just compromises the quality of that response. True, deep thought requires a moment of quiet reflection, of synthesis and formulation.
So a comfortable silence is actually a marker of trust, a profound marker of established rapport.
It is a huge sign of confidence and true active listening. If you are comfortable letting a silence sit there for a few seconds, you signal two really powerful things. First, you signal that you respect the gravity of the topic and the cognitive load required to discuss it. And second, you signal confidence in the relationship itself. You show that you don't need incessant chatter to prove your connection.
And the speaker then feels safe to formulate a thoughtful, high-quality response.
Exactly. And the listener shows they are waiting patiently to understand what is truly being said, not just reacting to the first thing that comes out of their mouth.
So it's the difference between a respectful pause that encourages depth and a panicked interruption that just forces superficiality.
That's it. Mastery of silence is really mastery of patience in communication.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit, moving from those broad social dynamics into the high-stakes professional realm. This is where soft skills become. They're not just nice to haves, they're essential tools for influence, negotiation, and strategy.
Absolutely.
And here, I think we have to start with the crucial distinction between assertiveness and aggression.
This distinction is paramount. It's everything if you want to maintain professional relationships while still strongly advocating for your position. The perspective we examine defines assertiveness as stating your needs, your ideas, or your opinions clearly and confidently, but without violating the rights or the dignity of other people.
Okay, so it's characterized by clarity, self-respect, and measured communication.
Exactly. In contrast, aggression is what we call steamrolling over people.
Right.
It involves disregarding the feelings or needs of others to make sure your own needs are met. And it often works through direct confrontation, intimidation, or even manipulative tactics like using sarcasm to demean someone.
And the consequences are just strategically different, aren't they?
Completely. Assertiveness might invite some pushback, sure, but it retains respect, it retains integrity and rapport, it allows for future collaboration. Aggression, on the other hand, while it might get you a short-term tactical win, it might force compliance in the moment.
It destroys trust.
It destroys trust, it damages long-term relationships, and it absolutely guarantees passive-aggressive resistance down the line from colleagues who feel like they've been steamrolled.
So the advanced communicator learns to leverage assertiveness as this balanced, sustainable force.
Yes, recognizing that the temporary gain from aggression is always outweighed by the permanent cost to your relationship capital.
Okay, so with that distinction in mind, let's talk about a very specific professional communication tool, one that requires both courage and maximum diplomacy, playing devil's advocate.
This is such a critical tool in any kind of high-level strategy session or organizational planning meeting. The definition is pretty straightforward. You argue against a prevailing idea, and not necessarily because you personally disagree with it,
Right.
but specifically to test the strength of the argument, to stress test the proposal, or to uncover potential flaws and weaknesses that everyone else might have overlooked in their excitement.
So it's like a formalized way of introducing constructive skepticism.
That's a great way to put it.
You're not saying this idea is inherently bad. You're saying, let's take this brilliant idea and subject it to some rigorous worst-case scenario scrutiny to see if it holds up under pressure.
And it is absolutely vital for strategic critical thinking. By forcing the proponents of an idea to defend it against thoughtful, skeptical inquiry, even if that inquiry is manufactured, you force them to build contingencies.
To strengthen their evidence, identify the gaps in their plan.
Exactly. If a plan cannot withstand a thorough devil's advocate interrogation, it was probably too fragile to implement in the first place.
And what's the key professional danger that playing devil's advocate helps prevent?
It prevents that destructive phenomenon known as groupthink.
Groupthink.
Yes. Groupthink is defined as the practice of thinking or making decisions as a group in a way that actively discourages independent thought, creativity, or individual responsibility.
It's that powerful tendency for groups to prioritize internal consensus and superficial harmony over rigorous critical evaluation.
Right. The observation we noted from the source is so simple but so true. Agreeing is easy.
And that ease is the very danger.
It is. The path of least resistance, just nodding along to whatever the dominant idea is, frequently leads to poor outcomes because the plan hasn't been properly examined.
The pressure to conform, or just that deep human desire to avoid conflict, it silences the dissenting voices that you actually need to hear.
So playing devil's advocate becomes the necessary internal mechanism to break that pattern. It formally legitimizes disagreement. It shifts the dynamic from the anxiety of, I disagree with you personally.
Which is a relational conflict.
Right. And it shifts it to, I am performing a necessary collaborative function for the success of our group, which is a critical shared responsibility.
But to do this effectively, to challenge the dominant idea without alienating everyone, requires the absolute highest degree of soft skill mastery. It's the art of disagreeing agreeably. It's diplomacy personified.
Diplomacy is the essential linguistic lubricant of constructive conflict. It's the whole game. The sophisticated skill is challenging the content of an idea without damaging the rapport or the respect you've worked so hard to build with the person.
And the crucial requirement that was highlighted is that you must validate the other person's perspective before you offer your counterpoint.
Yes, validation is the shield. It neutralizes defensiveness.
It proves you are actively listening.
It does, and it ensures the person feels heard and respected, even though you are about to critique their premise. You're acknowledging their intelligence and the effort they put into their idea.
So you strategically start on shared ground.
Always. And this is where mastering C2 level diplomatic language becomes absolutely indispensable. We have to move beyond the simple, I see where you're coming from, however, to genuinely sophisticated strategies that use complex grammar.
Okay, let's really focus on those linguistic structures. How does an advanced learner linguistically soften a powerful counterargument?
Well, we rely heavily on what's called hedging language and using modal verbs for suggestion. The goal, which is assertive but not aggressive, is to introduce an alternative as a possibility to be explored jointly. You shift the focus of the challenge away from the person's current idea and toward a future potential scenario.
Okay, give me an example. So instead of the aggressive version, like your strategy will fail because it ignores the budget constraints, which is just, it's going to put the person immediately on the defensive.
Right, their walls go straight up. So instead, you introduce multiple layers of conditional and non-absolute language. You might use the past conditional for softening and modal verbs for possibility. Consider a structure like this. If we were to consider the long-term scalability implications, might it potentially be more prudent to perhaps allocate the initial expenditure differently, provided the current budget constraints remain static?
Wow, okay, that is extremely sophisticated. Let's break that down. The phrase, if we were to consider, shifts the argument from a current error to this hypothetical collective future exploration.
Exactly. And the combination of might, potentially, and perhaps, turns what is a firm challenge into a gentle collaborative query. It's an invitation, not an attack.
Right.
The C2 communicator uses this kind of linguistic deflection constantly. They rely on complex subordinating conjunctions to show context phrases like, while I appreciate the speed of this approach, or on the proviso that we can secure X resources.
And these structures allow you to present a difficult or challenging idea while you are simultaneously protecting the rapport.
And that balance, that's what maintains mutual respect. It ensures the constructive conflict remains objective and about the idea, not the person. And it is, I think, the highest indicator of communicative maturity.
We have covered a remarkable amount of ground here. We've moved from, initial social intuition all the way to high-level diplomatic conflict resolution. Before we start to wrap up, let's just take a moment to make sure all those specialized terms we used are locked in for the learner. Let's connect the advanced vocabulary back to the strategies we talked about.
A brief recap is essential for synthesis. Absolutely. So first, we defined rapport as that feeling of connection and mutual trust. It's that harmonious relationship that good communication should always aim to establish and sustain.
And we identified the tool that helps forge that connection in the beginning, the social lubricant. That's our metaphor for things like small talk or humor that make those first potentially awkward interactions go a lot smoother.
Then we stressed the necessity of understanding subtext. That's the underlying theme or the hidden meaning that's carried by tone and context. It's crucial for decoding subtleties like sarcasm or complex understatement.
And if you're an efficiency-driven communicator, you might prefer the idiom to cut to the chase, which just means getting straight to the point and omitting all the unnecessary details.
And finally, in the professional setting, we warned against the peril of groupthink. That's the dynamic where groups prioritize agreement over critical evaluation, which makes the formalized opposition of the devil's advocate so vital. I think those 5 terms, when you couple them with the mechanics of active listening and diplomatic language, they really summarize the framework for advanced social navigation.
Okay, so now for the final, and I think most fascinating reflection point. A question that was posed directly by the source material that takes us beyond just technique and into the realm of identity. The questions were, do you find it easier to express complex emotions in your native language or in English? And maybe more surprisingly, do you think your personality changes even slightly when you speak English?
This is such a profound question.
Yeah.
Because it really touches upon the deep, deep relationship between language and how we express ourselves. I mean, the soft skills we've been discussing, assertiveness, tolerance for silence, the speed of interaction, they're often deeply embedded in cultural norms that are inextricably linked to the language we use.
So it's this idea that language does way more than just transmit information. It can actually shape the very way we permit ourselves to express our own identity. For example, if you primarily learned English in a very formal, say, North American business context, you might feel compelled to be much more direct, more assertive, maybe more pragmatic when you're speaking English, compared to your native language, which might permit greater emotional complexity or more cultural nuance in how you express things.
And this phenomenon actually has a name in the fields of psychology and linguistics. It's called cultural frame switching.
Cultural frame switching.
It's the observation that when bilingual or multilingual people switch languages, they often are subtly switching the cultural lens or the frame through which they view the world and conduct themselves socially. It's often an unconscious shift toward the norms and expectations that are associated with that specific linguistic context.
Let's try to ground this in a concrete example using the skills we've defined. Let's take assertiveness. For a learner whose native culture values extreme high-context communication, ambiguity, indirect disagreement, switching to an English environment where directness is prized, that forces a shift in identity.
It has to. Suddenly, you may find that when you're speaking English in a professional meeting, you are compelled to use more definitive, maybe even more aggressive-leaning language. More, I need this done by X statements, and fewer of those hedging phrases than you would ever dream of using in your native tongue. The linguistic frame itself compels you to adopt a more direct, maybe even a more confrontational communication persona.
And conversely, let's consider small talk tolerance. If a learner comes from a culture where relationship building is paramount and it requires this long, slow social lubricant phase, then entering a fast-paced UK or US business environment where everyone wants to immediately cut to the chase, that requires the learner to actively suppress their natural, culturally ingrained desire for that slow relational preamble.
The frame switching means you are adjusting your internal settings. Your settings for directness, for speed of delivery, for the necessary level of verbal deference. The expert really observed that these communication skills like active listening and diplomacy, they aren't universal laws. They are high-context expectations defined by the cultural frame you are currently operating within.
So true communication mastery isn't just about deploying the right vocabulary or using the right grammar. It's about recognizing which version of your personality, which communication frame is appropriate for the room you're currently in the process of reading.
That's it. It's the ultimate synthesis of situational and cultural awareness.
Wow. This has been an incredibly detailed, deep dive into the true substance of communication. I think the core lesson here is just so clear. Effective communication is exponentially less about what you say, the definitions, the grammar, and overwhelmingly more about how you navigate the social landscape.
Yes. You have to utilize situational awareness. You have to deploy active listening as a high-energy, demonstrable strategy, and you have to embrace diplomacy as your navigational tool in any kind of conflict. The ability to read the room and then adjust your approach accordingly is the critical difference between simply speaking English and achieving true social and professional fluency.
And if we had to pick just one powerful skill for continuous refinement, it has to be the complex components of active listening, right? Mirroring those genuine context-aware follow-up questions, appropriate eye contact. These are the tangible actions that constantly rebuild rapport and ensure you are truly listening to understand.
And not merely listening to reply. Absolutely. Yeah. Active listening is the most powerful soft skill we discussed because it directly undermines the primary barrier to rapport, which is that self-centered focus on formulating your own response. By demonstrating that intellectual and emotional engagement, you earn the right to be heard later.
So as you go out and apply these insights, and especially keeping that fascinating concept of cultural frame switching in mind, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Consider this. When you switch between your native language and English, which specific communication dynamic shifts the most for you? Is it your tolerance for small talk? Is it your comfort with silence? Or maybe it's the level of assertive or conditional language you feel comfortable deploying. And crucially, what does that specific shift tell you about the unspoken cultural subtext and the expectations that are associated with that linguistic frame? The answer will likely reveal more about the demands of the culture than any dictionary or textbook ever could.
Keep those thoughts brewing and keep observing the communication frames all around you. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the nuance of communication.
Keep practicing your diplomacy and keep processing the subtext. We'll connect with you on the next deep dive.